Our friends in blue arrived at my garage in the form of two police officers in a patrol car. I discreetly observed them from my hiding spot beneath the lift. It was unusual to see police officers with such cheerful expressions, but their demeanor quickly turned serious as they approached me. After confirming my identity, they delivered the unfortunate news that something had happened to my wife in our house, and she was currently in the hospital. However, they were unable to provide any further details. I immediately attempted to leave, but they halted me, seeking answers. "Can you please explain your whereabouts for the past 3 hours, sir?" one of the officers inquired. I responded, "Yes, officer, I've been here at the garage all day. You can verify with my two mechanics." Regrettably, I admitted, I did, however, sneak out for approximately 10 minutes around 11 a.m. to fetch some coffee for all of us. One of the policemen approached Mike and Pete to engage in conversation, while the other officer jotted down the name of the coffee shop I had visited. The officer then requested, "Could you show me your vehicle, sir?" I complied, leading him outside to where my cherished truck was parked. The meticulous officer thoroughly inspected the interior, opened the hood, and felt the engine, which was as cold as a stone. "That will be all, sir. You may proceed to the hospital." Upon arriving at the hospital, a look of concern adorned my face as a staff member provided me with an explanation of the extent of Kate's injuries. They informed me that she had received a blood transfusion and was currently undergoing surgery. I found it rather unprofessional that the doctor maintained a half-smile throughout our conversation. As I exited the hospital, I was intercepted by the same two policemen who had visited the garage earlier. They sought further answers and suggested we retreat to the hospital cafeteria for some much-needed coffee. They inquired about the state of my relationship with my wife. I proceeded to explain that we had met and married relatively late, 8 years ago. Kate had a successful career as an attorney at a prominent local firm. She had desired to have children but had resisted my pressure until she was nearly 40 years old, as she wanted to establish herself in her profession. The officers then questioned why she was at home on a weekday. I provided an explanation that Kate had resigned from her job a month ago in order to take a break before her pregnancy, a form of vacation before dedicating herself to domestic duties for the next decade. In conclusion, I expressed my love for my wife and stated that we are doing well and eagerly anticipating the arrival of our baby. I was approached by someone who inquired if I knew a certain John Barton. Upon responding negatively and asking for the reason behind the question, they evaded answering and walked away. Trusting my team to secure the garage, I proceeded straight home. The house was being searched by two forensic scientists and a detective. The detective introduced himself and provided an explanation of what he knew. He then posed the same questions as the previous officers, along with an additional one. "Can you explain why we found a few drops of blood in the downstairs toilet, sir?" "I'm sorry, detective, but I have no idea," I replied. "Now, may I ask you something? It is evident that this is not being treated as an accident, and I am being treated as a suspect. Can you assure me that you are not solely focusing on me as the primary suspect, but are also actively seeking the true culprit?" "Brett, you can rest assured, sir, that we have multiple lines of inquiry," he assured me. "My colleague is currently speaking with Mrs. Barton. Who is this John Barton that keeps being mentioned?" "I apologize, sir, but I believe it would be inappropriate for me to comment," he responded. With that, he and the CSIS departed, leaving me bewildered. I ascended to the master bedroom and observed the unfolding scene. If I were witnessing it for the first time earlier in the day around 10 a.m., I would undoubtedly be greatly shocked. While at work, thoughts of sex began to occupy my mind. This is not an uncommon occurrence, as it is said that men think about sex an average of 67 times per waking hour. However, let me tell you that men who have been virtually deprived of intimacy with their wives for a month can easily double that frequency. Since Kate left her job, our intimate encounters, which used to occur 2 to 3 times a week, have dwindled to nearly zero. Kate seemed to be in a perpetual state of either bad mood, boredom, or depression, or perhaps she was simply exhausted. Personally, I believed it was due to her realization that her previous way of life was drawing to a close. As a considerate spouse, I refrained from pressuring her, fully aware that she would overcome her fears in due time. While I anticipated that having children would bring about changes in my life, I also understood that her life would be completely upended. I often found myself daydreaming about the passionate intimacy we shared during the early years of our marriage. It was a spontaneous and exhilarating experience, no matter the time or place. However, as time went on, we gradually fell into a routine that many long-term partners find themselves in. Snapping out of my reverie, I realized what needed to be done: reintroduce spontaneity into our relationship. I made the decision to go home immediately and engage in passionate lovemaking with Kate until exhaustion took over. The die was cast. It was time to leave and head home. Before leaving, I informed my friend, Pete McKinn, that I would be away for a while. Pete asked if I could test drive the car he had just finished servicing upon my return. Disappointment washed over me when I noticed an unfamiliar vehicle parked in the driveway. My plans were seemingly ruined by my friend's unexpected visit. Nevertheless, I resolved to enter the house, hoping to convince my friend to leave and salvage my intentions. Without any hint of suspicion or concealment, I opened the front door. Instantly, a chill ran down my spine, and I knew that my marriage had come to an end. The unmistakable sounds of passionate lovemaking reverberated through the house, prompting me to instinctively reach for my phone and begin recording a video. It had become customary for me to capture a quick video whenever a client brought their car to the garage, ensuring that we wouldn't be falsely accused of causing any damage. With my heart pounding, I ascended the stairs and cautiously peered through the bedroom door, camera at the ready. To my dismay, it was indeed Kate, but with a man I didn't recognize. Overwhelmed with a mix of anger and sadness, I resisted the urge to burst into the room and confront them. I can honestly say that this was the most difficult moment of my life. My legs gave way beneath me, and I collapsed onto the floor just outside the door, utterly devastated. I was vaguely aware that their actions were reaching their climax just around the corner. Uncertain of how long I had been there, it gradually dawned on me that the sounds of their affair had ceased, leaving only hushed conversations in their wake. The pain still cut deep, just as before. Realizing that I needed to distance myself in order to gather my thoughts, I knew that any impulsive reaction driven by my emotions would only result in him being hospitalized and me ending up in prison at the very least. I needed time to think. Silently rising from the floor, I crept downstairs and settled onto the sofa, away from the sights, smells, and most of the sounds of their betrayal. I freed myself from the distractions of my emotions. I relied on my instincts and devised a plan. I had to remove him from the room and out of sight. I would confront him, ensuring minimal visible injuries. His stomach would bear the brunt of my anger. Then I would forcefully eject him through the back door, completely exposed. Afterward, I would return for her and do the same. This would send a clear message and grant me the freedom I desired, without any physical evidence or witnesses. I hoped to avoid a trial. Fortunately, I possessed the perfect weapon in my workshop to shock them both. 2 years ago, during my service in the Army Reserve National Guard, I was entrusted with the task of clearing the trucks we brought back to base. It was during this time that I stumbled upon a small device that would prove useful now. The police referred to it as a stern grenade, slightly larger than a standard grenade. These devices were specifically designed for hostage rescues, causing minimal physical harm while emitting a blinding flash of 8 million candles and a deafening sound of 170 decibels. The flash alone could incapacitate a person for at least 5 seconds. Driven by my newfound hatred, my mind swiftly formulated the remainder of the plan. I was determined not to cause any damage to my house, so throwing a grenade on the floor was out of the question. Instead, I devised a different plan. I carefully attached a short piece of rope to the device and created a loop at the end. With my preparations complete, I quietly made my way upstairs. However, as I approached, I realized that maintaining secrecy was no longer necessary. The unmistakable sounds of men's moans emanated from behind the bedroom door. I briefly paused to retrieve my phone from the floor where I had dropped it outside the door. Peeking around the doorframe, I discovered that the second round of intimacy was in full swing. My wife was pleasuring her lover by caressing him below the waist. Having mentally rehearsed my intended actions, I took a deep breath and proceeded accordingly. Stepping into the room, I looped the end of the rope around the hook on the bottom of the light fixture, allowing the device to hang halfway to the floor. I removed the pin and discreetly placed it in my pocket before exiting the room. Once outside, I tightly pressed my fingers to my ears and closed my eyes. Despite taking precautions, the impact was astonishing. Even through closed eyelids, I could feel the shock wave and see the bright light reflecting. Following the plan, I bravely re-entered the room, prepared for the aftermath. However, what I encountered was far from what I had anticipated. Mr. Anonymous lay on the bed, his manhood below the waist visibly damaged. It seemed that either nature had been unkind to him or something was missing. Meanwhile, Kate lay on the floor, her eyes vacant and her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Confused and taken aback, I retreated to the hallway to gather my thoughts. Suddenly, two piercing screams erupted from the bedroom, accompanied by loud crashes and slamming doors. It became clear to me that I was in serious trouble. My plan had failed. Once again, I cautiously peered around the doorframe, witnessing the chaotic aftermath. The man rolled off the bed and curled up on the floor, clutching his groin and shrieking like a banshee. Kate was nowhere to be found, but it seemed that she was inside the bathroom. We must eliminate any evidence. Upon returning to the room, I surveyed the area and swiftly located the detonator mechanism for the device. After adding it to the rope, I couldn't find anything else, leading me to conclude that everything else had been destroyed. I cautiously made my way to the bathroom. Kate was on her knees, vomiting into the toilet. I had no inclination to assist her. I simply no longer cared. While heading towards the door, I noticed something on the floor and picked up a piece of flesh. It was warm and soft, resembling the tip of a tongue. En route to the front door, I entered the first-floor toilet and flushed it. They wouldn't be able to reattach it. Careful not to screech the tires, I hurriedly drove down the street once again, grateful that our neighboring houses were far away. Halfway to the garage, I emptied my pockets into a roadside trash can. 10 minutes later, I returned to the small garage that served as my workplace. I summoned Pete and Mike, two oil-stained individuals whom I consider both employees and friends. They rushed over to me, sensing my alarm. "Guys, I need you to provide an alibi for the past 45 minutes, I requested. What do you say?" Almost simultaneously, they responded, "Of course, boss." "Well, before you agree so readily, I must inform you that what I have done is very serious," I cautioned. "Once I explain it to you, you may not be as quick to answer. I am uncertain of the charges I may face, but it could result in imprisonment." Prior to elaborating, I entered my office and donned my worn-out overalls. I then retrieved an oily rag from the trash can and rubbed it on my face and hands. I did not know when the police would arrive, but I anticipated their presence. The guys looked at me with a hint of astonishment. I briefly recounted the recent events to them. Mike was the first to crack, attempting to hold on for a solid 15 seconds before bursting into laughter. This broke the tension for Pete, who soon joined Mike and me in uncontrollable fits of laughter. It took a full 5 minutes before we regained our composure, and with firm handshakes and sincere promises of support, they returned to their greasy engine compartments. Over the following hour, spontaneous laughter emanated from various grimy chambers. My wife, Kate, was on the verge of reaping the well-deserved rewards for maintaining her distance from my humble acquaintances in the past. That evening, I was tidying up the main bedroom. I had just finished cleaning the bathroom floor. I made the decision to discard the bedding and mentally noted to purchase a new rug for the bedroom. The tattered curtains would also need to be replaced. I attempted to keep myself occupied, avoiding any contemplation. This endeavor was not aided by the incessant phone calls and persistent knocking on the door. Yes, the media was in a frenzy, eagerly seeking their next story. The combination of infidelity and a man losing his manhood was a tale sent straight from the heavens for them. I only opened the door once and promptly switched off the phone. Finally, with no distractions, I began to delve into some introspection. Do I regret my actions? Strangely enough, no. I despised cheaters with a burning passion. I had witnessed too many men transform into shadows of themselves upon discovering their partner's infidelity. The ironic thing was that even before lunchtime, I would have bet my life on the fact that my wife shared this same fervor. I was dumbfounded by how wrong I was. Not to mention, I was completely taken aback by Kate's motives. She appeared to be just as devoted to me as I was to her, and our intimate life had been absolutely blissful. Well, until recently, that is. After several hours of internal turmoil, I could only find one solitary clue. I recalled how my hair stood on end 2 months ago when Kate announced her retirement to enjoy her last moments of freedom. I had expected her to continue working until at least the 7th month of her pregnancy. There was something peculiar about her desire for one last hurrah before starting a family. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of my personal cell phone. Very few people knew this number. The caller ID displayed Kate's parents' number. They resided in the same state, albeit about 3 hours away. I always had a great relationship with them, so I responded. After skipping the usual pleasantries, her mother got straight to the point. "Dave, what's happening? Do you know why there are so many journalists in our house?" I couldn't bring myself to go into detail. "Mom, did you watch the local news tonight? Maybe the main news. What about that scandal involving a woman who humiliated her lover?" I always appreciated her mom's colorful language and unique perspective on life, but it certainly didn't make our conversation any easier. "Yes, Mom, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. The woman's name is Kate." Fortunately, my confusion was interrupted by a loud scream followed by a beep when I pressed the end call button on my phone. I noticed a warning on the screen. It reminded me that I had just finalized the end of my marriage 8 hours ago. I vaguely remembered leaving my phone recording outside my bedroom door. I knew that if I never knew or understood why Kate did what she did, I would struggle to trust any woman again. There was a strong possibility that I would become a lonely misogynist, condemned to a life of insignificance. With desperate hope, I started playing the video. I already knew what it would show. The pain was still too raw to relive the scene. I opened my eyes just as I placed the phone on the floor. Without a visual representation, only a view of the hallway ceiling, I had to imagine Mr. and Mrs. Adultery lying side by side on the bed. I couldn't clearly hear the conversation, so I downloaded the file onto my computer and amplified the sound. This was a crucial part of their discussion. "Wow, Kate, it was amazing. This past week has been incredible, actually. Does it really have to end today? My offer still stands. Just give me your word and I'll divorce Sarah and marry you." Well, yes, it seems like it could work. A great way to start a marriage with a man who abandoned his wife and children. No, and I love Dave too much to hurt him like that. After today, I will become Mrs. Goody-Goody, a devoted homemaker until our youngest child begins school. It is evident that you do not love him as much as I do. The person lying beside you is not him. No, you are mistaken. I deeply love him. From the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was my one true soulmate. I will never encounter another like him. Our physical connection is incredibly strong. I am grateful to have such a wonderful man who pampers me and will care for me when I bear his 2 or 3 children. My only desire is to pass away in his embrace, surrounded by our grandchildren. That was quite an impressive speech, but it raises an obvious question. Why are you with me now? At least Kate had the decency to ponder over it. There was a prolonged silence for about 30 seconds. I suppose I simply longed for the past. I didn't marry until I turned 31 and used to be quite adventurous. I missed the thrill of walking into a bar and attracting attention from various men, the excitement of leading someone on and then impulsively deciding whether to fulfill their desires or not. Recently, Dave has been going deer hunting with his friends every other weekend. 3 weekends ago, I decided to revisit my past and visit a bar. It resulted in a night that was mediocre and unsatisfying. Then, last Saturday, I coincidentally walked into the bar where you were, and here we are. Kate, you seem so distant. Let's consider this our final fling, regardless. Why are you complaining? Come closer. I stated that it had to end today. I did not specify that it had to end immediately. I muted the sound. At least now I know that I am a skilled lover and a devoted husband. The issue does not lie with me. The subsequent days passed with utter disappointment. 2 days later, the journalists disbanded and departed from my tranquil street. The hospital administrator contacted me and informed me that Kate would appreciate some pajamas. I neglected to bring them along. She will have to endure those humiliating hospital gowns. 2 days later, her father reached out to me. He expressed his apologies for his daughter's behavior and expressed his desire for me to maintain contact with him in order to improve the situation. He reminded me that he has another daughter who recently went through a divorce Regrettably, Father, I find this situation too peculiar. 4 days later, he appeared on the news once again. Mr. Not-So-Big Dick had been discharged from the hospital. Journalists had uncovered some information and exposed him as a habitual cheater. Therefore, it was with some satisfaction that they announced that although the surgeons had successfully reattached his manhood, it was highly unlikely to function as intended. Towards the end of that week, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mrs. Barton, or Sarah as she insisted I call her, was an attractive woman with sorrowful eyes. She informed me that she had heard rumors suggesting that I possessed evidence that could assist her in her divorce case. I explained that it might be true, but I couldn't admit it without incriminating myself. She understood the situation and apologized for asking. I reassured her that there was an abundance of circumstantial evidence that she wouldn't require what I possessed. However, if it turns out that I was mistaken, I would persuade her to return and reconsider. Her profound sadness evoked sympathy within me. I retrieved the video file and played it for her, showing only the aftermath of the significant explosion. Initially, the sound of her husband's screams startled her, but she quickly composed herself. It is safe to say that she did not appear very sorrowful when she left. Being the helpful person that I am, I offered her the opportunity to pick me up when her sadness resurfaced. Oh yes, that was not the last time I encountered Sarah Barton. The final visitor I received was perhaps the most peculiar. On Saturday, I opened the door to find the detective I had spoken to at the house on the day of the significant event. He was no longer wearing a suit, but instead jeans and a shirt. "Hey, son, I won't come in," he said. "I just wanted to inform you that if there is insufficient evidence, I have recommended closing the case." Upon receiving Kate's letter, it was delivered to me on the following Tuesday. In her letter, she expressed her deep remorse and apologized for the pain she caused me. She understood why I couldn't bring myself to visit her and offered her unconditional forgiveness. Kate admitted that she never fully considered the potential consequences of her actions and never anticipated that her parents would disown her. She acknowledged that she had lost my love, trust, and respect forever, which deeply saddened her. Kate mentioned that she would understand if I chose to never speak to her again, but believed that it might aid in my healing process if she explained her motivations. She emphasized that she took full responsibility for her actions. According to the doctors, it seems that I may not be able to speak normally for a significant period of time, if at all. They suspect that I may have accidentally swallowed the tip of my tongue when I bit it off. They have informed me about an experimental stretching technique that could potentially restore some functionality. I am hopeful that this treatment will be successful, as it would allow me to resume my career and provide a distraction from the bleak and loveless future I currently face. In the event of our divorce, I am willing to agree to any terms you desire and will sign any necessary documents, on the condition that you keep me on your health insurance for the foreseeable future. I would be eternally grateful for this gesture. In conclusion, I bid you farewell, my love. I sincerely wish you nothing but happiness in the days to come. I hope that my actions have not completely shattered your life. With love, Kate, also known as your unfaithful wife. I must admit that her letter deeply moved me, prompting me to reconsider my previous decision. As a result, I promptly sent her pajamas to the hospital, along with the contact information for Mick and Pete. I wonder if I owe them a beer or perhaps even a keg each. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel to ensure that your second spouse doesn't betray you. Furthermore, I urge you to listen to the next story, as it promises to be far more captivating than the one you just heard. However, if you are under the age of 18, I strongly advise against listening to the upcoming tale.